Welcome, Pewter Report readers, viewers, and listeners to a brand new edition of the Pewter Report podcast brought to you by our friends over at Briar Greaves Insurance. Protecting your assets starts with a company that you can count on. So whether it's auto, homeowners, flood, boaters, or business insurance, there is nobody better in the business to work with than the great people over at Briar Greaves Insurance. For more information about them, visit their website at briargreavesinsurance.com or give them a call at 813-876-4166. That's 813-876-4166. It is a Tuesday edition of the Pewter Report podcast. Hope everybody had a great Labor Day weekend, having that Monday off as we get closer and closer to the start of the NFL season. The Bucs do play on Sunday at Atlanta. So we're very excited to get into today's show with a very special guest and a friend of the program. We're talking about all of the NFC South. Who will be the king of the NFC South? Will it be the Bucs again? We are joined by Fox Sports Greg Auman. I'm your host, Matt Matera. Greg, thank you so much for coming on this afternoon. How are we doing?
Doing well, Matt. Doing well. Thanks for having me. Hope you're doing well.
Doing pretty good. Very excited about Bucs Falcons, which I believe you will be in attendance for, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, so that's going to be a lot of fun. Let's start off with just kind of a general question about the NFC South as a division, maybe minus the Saints. Has this complete division improved as a group, or is it still kind of looked at as maybe one of the lesser divisions in all of the NFL?
I think it's improved. You got new coaches, you got young quarterbacks, so it's nationally, it's still probably seen as one of the worst, if not the worst divisions in the NFL. AFC South kind of right there running with them, if you will. The Saints, there's probably less expectations of the Saints than just about anybody. And then you have Carolina and Atlanta, with young, unproven quarterbacks who could rise up, could certainly challenge for a wild card. But I think it's right now, you look at those power rankings that come out, I'm always intrigued. The first thing I look at is just what the disparity is between the Bucs and the rest of the division. I think somebody just had one today where it's like 14 spots between, it's like 8 and 22 or 10 and 24, something like that. So the national thought going into the year, very different from the last couple Bucs seasons, is that they're the team to beat. They're the consensus heavy favorite to win the division. You still see people that'll pick Atlanta and they'll pick Carolina, but I think it's seen as an outside the box pick this year, as opposed to last year when most people probably picked Atlanta.
Yeah, there were a handful of people that had the Falcons taking the division, but not so fast, as the great Lee Corso would once say. Sticking with that topic, what do you think is a more realistic possibility? Atlanta overtaking the Bucs for first place, or Carolina moving past Atlanta for second place in the NFC South?
That's a good question, and Atlanta is the wild card in both those equations. So I think not literally the wild card, but the X factor. I go into the season thinking that second is more up for grabs than first, if you will. I still think, and honestly, Sunday afternoon will go a long way towards either validating that or saying no, that's not the case. In that, I think any conversation about the Bucs and Falcons has to start with the fact that Atlanta swept Tampa Bay last year and very much had the division theirs to win. The fact that the Bucs did, obviously the Bucs played well down the stretch, but hand in hand with that was Cousins playing injured or not playing well, however you want to swing it, and them dropping the ball. So for that to continue, I think you go into this season thinking the Bucs are the team to beat, but all it really takes is that, they go to Atlanta, they lose. I think the national narrative will be, wow, Atlanta still has Tampa Bay's number. Bucs are going to have to play catch up with a first place schedule. That's not easy to do. So I think the Bucs can help establish themselves and that idea that they're the class of the division by simply taking care of business on Sunday and winning on the road.
It's so interesting too, looking at this matchup with the Bucs and Falcons, because yes, the Falcons did sweep Tampa Bay last year, but it wasn't with Michael Penix Jr. So that's a complete different factor. Injuries on the offensive line for the Bucs and for Atlanta as well, especially when you add in Hassan Reddick going against potentially a third string offensive tackle. This matchup, even though it's the top two teams technically, looks completely night and day different than it did a season ago.
Yeah, absolutely. You think about it, because I remember I was just looking at the two box scores, the two Bucs Falcons games last year. You kind of almost forget them. They all blur together, but
Yeah,
really different games, because that first game is so back and forth. Cousins is 42 of 58 for 509.
insane.
It's crazy. And the second game is much more kind of Falcons in control. He's 23 of 29, literally half as many passes, still 4 touchdowns, which is crazy. And then they just kind of hold on at the end. So, yeah, you look back at things and it's almost unfair to Michael Penix, because his first, he had 3 games last year, but you come out with a division game at home, and it's a team that the guy who's still kind of there as your backup lit up for 8 touchdowns in 2 games last year. So you just worry about the pressure that puts on him. I think he's got the job. I think he knows he doesn't have to look over his shoulder, but I think it just sets the bar really high for him in the first game. And that if you come out there and you throw 2 touchdowns and lose, I think some of the talk is just going to be, wow, the other guy had 4 touchdowns, but yeah, that's fine. And that's tough, because he's got, again, this is if you're trying to set narratives in this division, he can help himself in a big way by coming out, outplaying Baker Mayfield, getting the win at home, reasserting that they're a team that swept the Bucs. And had they not kind of had that ridiculous 4-game stumble in November, could have been the one that was the division title. That's all in play if they win. If they lose, I think it'll be like, well, the Bucs were the team last year. They've won it 4 in a row. Now they're in the driver's seat. And, the Bucs have a tougher schedule. It's not like Atlanta doesn't have the entire season to catch up, but I think it advances things if they can get that win on the road.
What do you think about Michael Penix Jr. not playing at all in the preseason? Because to me, I get it when Baker Mayfield does it. He's a veteran, certainly was fantastic with the Bucs last season, but Penix only a couple of games last year, still kind of getting acclimated to the NFL. To me, I thought that was a pretty bizarre move by Atlanta, but curious to get your thoughts about it.
Yeah, inexplicable for me is what I would say. I get wanting to protect him, wanting to mitigate the injury risk involved, but he's had 3 games that he's had 3 starts, and that's all he has. It's the same offense. It's largely the same cast of characters he's throwing to and has blocking for him and stuff. But it seems odd. And again, they're doing that with Mayfield. Mayfield's in year 7, year 8 here. So it would strike me, if Penix doesn't come out of the gate sharp, if they're 3 and out or pick, or they dig themselves a hole early, I think it's really easy to say, boy, that is his first game action in 10 months, in 9 months. There are a lot of other teams that did this. I think there were 10 projected starters that took no snaps at all. None of them probably as young as Michael Penix. I think you saw, with McCarthy, with Cam Ward. I think it's like, give him a series in this game, give him a chance just to get out there and get the feel. Even if you're playing against backups that might not make a roster, I just think you've been in this situation. It's more comfortable than walking in with a hot mic and everything is live. And if you make a mistake, oh, sorry, that's everything counts now. He might handle that really well. I'm sure part of their confidence in not playing him is seeing him every day in practice, seeing how well he leads this team, knows this offense, carries himself as a starting quarterback. He just hasn't had many chances to do that before.
Sure, that's true. Like behind the scenes stuff that we don't know about, that Raheem Morris might have a little more confidence in. I also like that he kind of got into that fight and then he's like, well, I'm from Tampa, Florida. Like, that's supposed to be expected. And it's like, well, if you're a Falcons fan, it's like, well, we don't like Tampa. Like, please stop saying that. But anyway, that's just kind of a side note. I think it makes for a very interesting storyline, especially with a young quarterback going up against Todd Bowles and the type of defense that he likes to run, and the the chaotic blitzes that he can come up with too. So let's spend a little bit of time on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and we'll get back to Atlanta.
Yeah.
Your overall thoughts on this roster? The depth chart just came out a little while ago. I know offense and defense, it's not the most surprising, but some news about punt and kick returner as well. What do you make of Sean Tucker as the main kick returner and Cameron Johnson too, versus like Tez Johnson and some of the other candidates?
Yeah, I don't read too much into that. I was surprised, to see there's a couple things they can point to, like to see Cam Johnson listed ahead of Tez Johnson. The 2 things that pop out to me are that, first and foremost, with no Godwin, with no McMillan, I think Tez is going to be fairly involved in this offense. I think he and Shep are probably really equal footing as wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4. Okay. And that's counting on a rookie to be wide receiver 2. So I think he's going to be involved in the offense. And I don't know if I can see it where it's like, hey, let's not put too much on this guy in his first NFL game on his plate. Let's let somebody else handle the returns. You focus on offense, make plays there. That would explain it to me. The idea that the default on almost every depth chart you see is to list veterans above rookies whenever it's close, that also would explain it. Not that Cam Johnson is 35 years old or anything, but I think he's been there before. So I think, we saw Cam Johnson had a 57-yard kickoff return in the last preseason game. So he's done it. Absolutely. He made this team on his upside as a big play receiver. I feel like if you really were that excited about Cam Johnson, you probably wouldn't have drafted Tez Johnson. So my instinct is that Tez is the guy that'll probably be the punt returner. I think Thomas McGahee likes backs as kickoff returners. So it'll be Tucker. The only reason it wouldn't be Tucker is if they somehow feel like because Rachaad White is doing less offensively, they could put him back there and have him be a returner. One of those two would make sense. If it's Josh Williams, I'd be really surprised. That'd be seeing something that would be trusting an undrafted rookie in a key role when you have some depth at running back that you probably trust a little bit more right now. So I'll be intrigued to see who actually lines up there. They'll also have the 2 guys deep, so it could very well be Tucker and White or Tucker and Williams. And then it invites them to figure out which one of those 2 they want to kick to. It'll be fun to see. But I think if I had to guess, I know they list them there, I would think it's 2 backs for kickoff returns. And I guess you'd just say a Johnson on punt return.
Right. I kept thinking that when I'm writing stories, I was like, I got to specify which Johnson because they're both involved. Thomas McGahee did say, the special teams coordinator, he did say it's going to be a fluid situation. So I honestly wouldn't be surprised if we see a little bit of everyone, maybe even Josh Williams, not week 1, certainly, but at some point gets an opportunity. And I'm very curious to see what's up with Tez Johnson as a receiver, because we were talking about it a little bit in the media room. Emeka Egbuka, everybody knows about at this point in terms of he's going to be wide receiver 2 next to Mike Evans for as long as Chris Godwin and Jalen McMillan are out. Sterling Shepard is certainly that veteran that has that chemistry going back to Oklahoma with Baker Mayfield. But to me, Tez Johnson is such an interesting piece. Like, he can be a gadget guy. He's got that yards after the catch, break tackle ability that he certainly learned from his good buddy, Bucky Irving. But he, to me, could really be something special for this group that maybe we didn't know about right away. Because Egbuka, we certainly do. Mike Evans, obviously, is the greatest offensive player in Bucs history. But Tez Johnson, to me, could be more of a key factor than I think we realize.
Yeah, and I think it helps is that, like, within this context right now, with no Godwin, with no McMillan, I think Atlanta's going to be really aware of Egbuka everywhere he is. I think they will treat him like a strong receiver too, if you will. I don't know if they'll be that way with Tez Johnson, whether it's Tez or Shep. I think those guys, again, you're getting a nickel or a safety. You're getting non-priority coverage from a defense. And I think Tez has better make people miss in the open field stuff than anybody they've had in a while, just in terms of sheer make a move, juke somebody out of their shoes, and then make a play. And I think that suits them. I think there's a surprise factor they have with him that might not be there in week 5. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if that's one of those where Egbuka has exceeded. It's hard to be a first-round pick and exceed expectations at every level up till now, but he has, to where, again, if he doesn't have 60 yards and a touchdown Sunday, it's going to be like, oh, okay. No. He's capable of absolutely being a strong number 2. Even in a world, I mean, when Godwin comes back, Godwin's the 2, obviously, because he's Chris Godwin. But I think in that short term, they have a lot of confidence in what Emeka can do next to Evans, taking advantage of whatever extra coverage Mike draws on the opposite side, just as Chris has.
Now, a lot of this, of course, will be determined by what Baker Mayfield does this season. What do you kind of predict for him in terms of, last year was such a sensational season with all the touchdowns and the passing yards as well. But now you have to factor in no Tristan Wirfs for the beginning, missing 2 of his top 4 receivers. I kind of think there's going to be more of an emphasis on running the football just based on you have all the offensive line back except for Wirfs, and knowing what Bucky Irving did this season, I think we might see Baker's numbers drop a little bit, but still be able to have a functional offense that I think eventually can get back to 30 points, going through a couple of growing pains early on. But, how do you see the season kind of shaping out for Baker?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, man. I mean, I think this is a year where if Baker has the same stats he did last year in terms of 4,500 yards, 41 touchdowns, it honestly doesn't bode well for where the Bucs are as a team, because I think part of him doing that last year was them having to be in games, needing plays late where they threw more. I think if their defense is better, as they fully expect it to be, they had a top 5 run game last year. So I think they're going to be a team that prides themselves on running the ball in volume. And that means less opportunities for Baker. If they get to the red zone, I think they completely trust him there. But he could have, if he has a season where instead of 41 touchdowns, he has 35 touchdowns, but also has 10 picks instead of 16, that's probably a more successful season. That probably bodes well for the offense and the balance and all the things they want. So, yeah, I think Mayfield, again, what he did last year is probably the best non-Brady quarterback season in Bucs history, right? But I think it's almost for him to have a new coordinator, another guy making his first year as a play caller, all those things. You mentioned Wirfs, you mentioned Godwin. These are all fair things that he has to overcome. I don't think he needs to match last year's numbers overall from a volume standpoint to have a really good year.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's like he doesn't need to be a game manager by any means. He needs to be somewhere between game manager and his prolific season last year, because as great as it was, he did also tie Kirk Cousins for the season lead in interceptions, which is crazy to say out loud considering that Kirk Cousins got benched and the Falcons were barely scoring any points. But let's look at the defensive side real quick before we go to Atlanta and Carolina as well, maybe a little New Orleans too. But, what would you say are the biggest pitfalls for the Bucs defense, but also, I guess, improvements as well? Because there's a couple I have in mind, but want to get your thoughts about that. Where the Bucs got better defensively and where maybe you have some concerns going into the season.
Yeah, I think it starts, and again, you don't have to remind Bucs fans of this after last year, but it starts with being healthy. I mean, there's definitely a couple positions where they are ill-equipped to handle a long-term injury. And I think they feel very good about their starting defense. I think they feel very good about outside corner and being able to handle a single loss there. But I think there are other positions where it would really hurt them. So staying healthy first and foremost is the pitfall to avoid, to guard against. There's guys that could step up that we just don't know right now. I think so much of this Bucs defense and so much of the reason for the optimism around this defense is just the additions within the existing roster and the idea of Servassier Dennis for a full season as a complement to Levante David. Elijah Cansey healthy from the start, and having Vea and Cansey up the middle to make lives easier for your ends and your outside linebackers. And then Hassan Reddick is an actual addition. That's a tangible guy who was not there. If he's anything like 20 to 23 Hassan Reddick, it's a game changer. It's 12, 15 sacks, forced fumbles. The biggest difference for me, like statistically, in where this defense can take a massive step forward is takeaways and turnovers. And the idea that they won their division last year in a season where they had 7 picks as a team is amazing. So I think better pressure up front leads to worse passes coming out, and the opportunity for picks goes way up. They can double that number. They can triple that number with the defense they have. If just things stay healthy, things go to plan, you get ahead more often, teams are throwing from behind, it creates turnovers. I think about this Bulls defense, it's a defense that's predicated on pressure and takeaways. And they just didn't have nearly enough of either of those last year. So I think going into this year, if they're healthy, big gains in all those areas. You think about how big a leap the offense made last year to go from whatever they were, 19th or whatever they were in total offense, to a top 5 offense. The defense has a chance. I don't think it'll be top 5 unit, but I think the defense can take a big step forward to where, 29th against the pass last year, just to get, 15, 12, something like that is a massive step forward that makes life easier for the offense. And keeps you in control of games in a much more consistent way than they were as a team that won the division last year.
And they certainly started doing that early on in the preseason, especially that last quarter of the first game and going into the second game as well. And it was good to see like Zion McCollum get an interception in Pittsburgh, because he was one of the few guys that did not have an interception in some training camp practices, but was able to do it when the bright lights are on. Certainly Zion will have an important role on this team. We're talking with Greg Auman from Fox Sports. You can follow him at Greg Auman. His name is right there on the screen, so everyone can check it out. If you're not already doing so, I mean, you should be. Talking about the Atlanta Falcons, what are the strengths and weaknesses of this team going into the season? Because I find them a very peculiar group overall.
Yeah, I think their offense should be a top 10 offense. I mean, just a great run game. And I think you see Bijan Robinson is one of the most exciting young running backs in the league. Talent to throw to. I mean, Drake London, Darnell Mooney. I mean, Kyle Pitts hasn't necessarily been what they wanted to be, but I think of this as a really good offense. You know, up until they lost Caleb McGarry, had a solid line. Now they have a question at tackle there. But, you know, so much of Atlanta's success is just going to hinge on Michael Penix and who he is, where he fits. You think about the spectrum of all the great quarterbacks that were drafted last year around him and had immediate success, led their team to the playoffs. Jaden Daniels did it. Bo Nix did it. Obviously, Caleb Williams wasn't quite the same, but was right there. Drake May showed promise. So I think with Penix and with McCarthy, they're very much the same boat. There's a lot weighing on someone who, in McCarthy's case, hasn't played a snap, but in Michael Penix's case, I mean, he had three games at the end of last season. Just kind of a wet your whistle. Here's your first look at the NFL. I don't think it was amazingly promising or damning. I think he got the experience he needed to give them confidence for him to be the guy in 26. So their defense, I think, is a lot more questionable. You know, they've made some changes from a coaching perspective. They've lost some key pieces from a personnel standpoint. That secondary has some question marks, I guess you'd say right now. So I think they're much stronger. That offense should be I think a top 10 offense, you know, and will keep them in a lot of games. I worry that their defense isn't as good and will kind of get exposed a little bit. They're counting on, I think smartly, they put a huge amount of resources into their outside pass rush and use their first round pick. And honestly, next year's first round pick to get Walker, to get Pierce, I mean, if you think about what they did at quarterback a year ago, to overinvest in a key position, they did the same thing with edge in this draft. It was neat. We talked to Todd Bowles. I mean, Todd Bowles knows that Georgia defense really well because his son played there. His son Floyd played there. So he knows Walker. And he said Pierce, again, one of his favorite guys in the draft. You know, somebody that I don't know if I understood putting next year's first into getting him whenever it was, you know, late first round this year. But it gives them, you know, a chance. I mean, literally their top two sack guys this season could very well be those two rookies. So how quickly that takes, how well they're able to be counted on, not just to get the quarterback, kind of be good against the run too, will be a big part of whether that defense is a problem or is something that can hold up and have them competitive in the division.
I know it's apples and oranges, but if all things were the same, who do you think has a more prolific offense? Tampa Bay when everyone's available, or Atlanta when everyone's available? And let's just say Michael Penix. Let's say Michael Penix like works out, you know, for Atlanta.
Yeah, I think especially once they're full strength, like by the end of the season, like December 1 or whatever you think will be full strength, I still think the Bucs are probably better. Just as it's the same group that was a top 5 offense in almost every aspect. I think you look at last year, you know, I think Atlanta has a chance to be better, but the odds of them being a better pass offense under Penix is tough. I mean, because he had, on balance, had some absolute dry stretches where he wasn't good at all. But again, I had 2 4-touchdown games. So if you told me going into year 25 touchdowns for Michael Penix, that'd be a great first year as a starter, and you'd take it. I don't know if that puts them in the same realm as Mayfield, who's 35 to 40. I think Bijan Robinson can absolutely be a top 3 NFL running back. You think right now? I think Tyler Algier is a really strong number 2. That when some of the reasons that Bijan wasn't a 1,700-yard rusher is that they pulled him and they ran Algier in key situations because they trusted him. So it's a legit 1-2 punch there. It's not unlike what the Bucs have and will have with Bucky Irving and with Rachaad White. But I think if I had to choose right now, again, both these teams at the end of the year in points, in yards, should have top 10 offenses.
I love the question you asked the other day to Todd Bowles about if it's different defending against a lefty quarterback, as we are fellow left-handers ourselves. It's not something you think about too much, but like it is a little bit of a different spin on the football. And it's good to see that there are lefty representative quarterbacks in the league. I know like Steve Young kind of is the mantle of it for sure. But yeah, it'll be really interesting because I do believe that Atlanta, like if Michael Penix does work out the same way that some of the rookie quarterbacks you mentioned last year, well, then they are a legitimate threat to Tampa Bay. And I have similar questions about the defense, the same way you kind of painted it out with some of the edge rushers being young but needing to work out. I love their pick of Xavier Watts too from Notre Dame. I thought that was a great pick. I wanted the Bucs to get him. So
yeah, man, you remember we were there draft night, like, and we talked to Morrison, and it was like, he's talking about how close he is, how tight he is, how much he wants Xavier Watts to come to Tampa, and it made sense. I mean, it's one of those we're going into the third round. It was kind of ball hawk safety. It felt like a Bucs pick, and I forget how far ahead Atlanta was, but it's like, oh wow, I was there. I mean, Watts is probably a week 1 starter. They'll be counting on him in a big role for that defense. I mean, that's tough for a third rounder, but they like him. They trust him. That it would have been fun because, like I said, there was a moment there where you thought about, oh, wow, to hear 2 guys, similar traits, winning program. I think there's in a separate world where that guy's available, he might be there. Tyke might be a nickel. Parrish might be somewhere else. But I think they're real happy with the way it worked out just the same.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's always fun with those what ifs. One more for the Falcons for you. If things don't work out for Atlanta, say they stumble down the stretch they did last season, is Raheem Morris on the hot seat, just given the expectations of this team over the last 2 years?
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, I think there's an urgency to this team. I think he was fine. I didn't necessarily think he was somebody that would lose his job last year, the way things went. But I do think, if they're not competitive for the wild card, if they're, let's say, 7-10 or worse, I would worry for him. I mean, that's one of those where, Arthur Blank feels like that's a team that can win. I mean, they've been a team that's been picked to win. So if you're, this is now, year 3, you start to wonder if it's there for him. And it's one of those where he's changed coordinators. He'd made major changes trying to adjust for things. For his sake, they do well to be at least a wild card. Get to, you get 9-8, you still finish second in the division. There's progress. There's an improvement in record. Then for them just to end that postseason drought is probably the biggest thing. Them and Carolina, I think, go back to the same year. I forget if it's 17 or where it is, but there's a drought there, and there's not many teams that have gone longer without. So first and foremost is getting that out of the way, resetting that clock, so you can have the expectation going into a season of, you made the playoffs last year, and the very least you do that again as the mark of success for what'll be 26 or whatever it be.
It is crazy how, like, in the past decade, how different the NFC South has been as a division in terms of who's led it and who's been the cellar dweller. We'll talk about the Carolina Panthers in just a moment, but first, got to talk about walk-ons. I was just there yesterday in the Midtown location. There's 3 in the Tampa Bay area, 1 in Lakeland, another in Wesley Chapel, and a third in Midtown Tampa. They have awesome deals all the time, including today's the day to go. Tuesday, all day happy hour, including $5 Tito's. The food is fantastic. I had the burger yesterday. The wings are incredible. Also had that artichoke spinach dip. It's terrific. Great array of drinks as well. So there's something for everybody. And Touchdown Tuesdays during football season, you can get some rewards if you are a member over at Walk-Ons. And like I said, 3 in the Tampa Bay area. So shout out to Walk-Ons. Tons of TVs, watch all the football, all the sports that are coming back. Maybe playoff baseball for the Phillies and hopefully the Mets and maybe the Rays. Maybe they'll go on a run. But yeah, Walk-Ons, absolutely love it. Make sure you check it out at a location near you. Okay, the Carolina Panthers, I thought, made a great run towards the end of the season. It really felt that, first of all, they knocked off Atlanta in that final game, but Bucs fans were a little more focused on Mike Evans getting over 1,000 yards. But Dave Canales, it really feels like, Baker Mayfield has called him a positivity bully. It feels like Carolina has bought into the positivity of Dave Canales. So how do you see the outlook for Carolina this year in terms of their strengths and some of their weaknesses?
Yeah, I think they're right there. It's kind of like if they can take the same step forward in 25 they did in 24, they should be right there to challenge the Falcons for second. I don't know if it'll get them challenging the Bucs for first, but their ceiling this year, their upside this year is certainly a wild card, and in that direction, get to 8 wins, get to 9 wins. That's a great story for year 2, taking over a 2-win program. I think their offense will be improved. I think Ted McMillan was a really good, smart, to put your first round pick into receivers 2 years in a row is hooking Bryce Young up. It's getting rid of the excuses he's had. A year ago, they put the big money into 2 guards to give him a more competent offensive line. And now he just needs weapons. So I think, that offense should be improved. I think the games they won last year, they largely won despite Bryce Young. And I think this is a year where, as a number 1 overall pick, he has to start winning games for him. I think Bryce has 1 300-yard game in 2 seasons. And I think that's where they have to take a step forward. I think you can have a much more prolific, if you just think about the backs they have, if you think about McMillan, Leggett, I guess Renfro would be the 3 if Coker's hurt right now. That's an offense that should get up into the middle third of the league if they're doing it right. And if they're not, you worry about Bryce Young and you worry about how long a clock he has before they start trying to replace him. Atlanta, Carolina, both of them, I worry that their defense are still not at the level it needs to be. Carolina's defense was bad. I think first and foremost, they get Derek Brown back. That's their best player defensively. And I think to put him up front is a Vita Vea level presence and confidence against the run that they didn't have. I mean, they lost him right away last year. It undercut their whole defense. So that's where the improvement comes from. I think they've done a really smart job. If you look at Carolina in free agency, they got a lot of second contract guys, 25-year-olds that weren't necessarily starters, but were key rotational pieces from really good programs. And I don't know how quick, I don't know if any of those will elevate to the point where they're just major stars, but you think about Bobby Brown from the Rams, you think about Tershawn Wharton from the Chiefs. Okay. You think about, I'm blanking here, but you think about the pass rusher from Minnesota that had a bunch of sacks last year. I'm blanking on his name. Jones. I think it's Patrick Jones. I thought they did a good job without writing huge checks to get young guys they can build around that can grow with that defense as they get better. So for them, it's just a matter. I mean, again, they had J.C. Horn that was hurt for a while last year. So they're another defense like the Bucs where just getting their key pieces healthy again will help them be a competitive team. I don't know if it's outside 7-8 wins, they've done really well. If it's less than 7-8 wins, that's a little bit of stagnancy where they didn't take the step forward. They didn't continue the positive momentum that they got in the second half of last season. Running back is tough to see with them. I think Chuba Hubbard did really well under the circumstances. Last year got paid to bring in Rico. I think that helps. I don't know. It's one of those where, Carolina is probably the least predictable of the 4 teams. I think everybody right now writes in the Bucs at 1 and writes in the Saints at 4. And Atlanta, I think you can just pin it on Penix and say, well, if he's great, they'll be great. If he's not so great, there. Carolina, we don't know. Carolina could see Bryce take another step forward. Like if you think about Bryce and Penix, okay, Bryce is a year ahead of Penix in terms of his third year, certainly a wealth more experience. But if I asked you right now, who's more likely to throw more touchdowns? I think the upside of Penix, I think most people would say Penix right now. It might be like 24-22 or something like that. But I think Young has the opportunity, if you just forget about who he's been, give him the weaponry he has, an offensive-minded coach who's been good in the past, maybe is kind of settling into being a head coach a little better. There's a world where he helps them take a step forward. I don't know that it'll happen dramatically where they're 9-8 and they get in the playoffs. And again, they reset their clock because it's been a while for them too. But I think they're every bit the idea that there's a season where they're not dead last and they're not everybody's consensus 4 speaks well for how well they've taken advantage of the Saints' misfortunes and grabbed that spot. And now it's like, can you do the same thing with Atlanta and catch them? So that's the intrigue to me, is how 2-3 shake out, and whether one of those two. This is a division that hasn't necessarily produced wild cards with any regularity.
Yeah.
So if this division can produce a wild card, that speaks really, that gets you out of the worst division in the league conversation for a little bit at least.
It does. It helps the reputation of the overall division. I'm so intrigued by Carolina this year because you make some great points about injuries that occurred to them last year defensively. I think McMillan's going to be huge for them this season. I'm intrigued what he has to do. And I believe also their entire offensive line is back. And we spent a lot of time talking about that for the Bucs this offseason with the understanding of the Wirfs injury. But that could be a big factor, too, going into this year. We got to talk about the Saints just real quick. I see them as likely getting the number 1 overall pick this year. Not a lot of talent. They have a little bit at wide receiver, but I don't see much from the team this year. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I feel the same way right now. It's one of those where I think quarterback is not a position you can answer with half measures and they keep trying. So you use a mid-round pick on Jake Haener, and then you take Spencer Rattler, and he goes 0 for 5. So you reach a little bit, and you use a second-round pick on Tyler Shock, who's not your week 1 starter. So it's confusing to me. Obviously, a lot of their limitations are cap related. They have put themselves in such a hole in terms of flexibility and what they can do that they get locked in with players just because they can't really afford to cut them. So I think they have an old defense. Matthew's gone now, but you still have Demario Davis. You still have Cam Jordan. They both have actually did a pretty good job last year, not to show their age, but the lack, I think what's most concerning is kind of the lack of young guys to be excited about. Guys, for you to get out of the hole you're in cap-wise, you really have to draft well. You have to hit on draft picks. And I don't know that they've done that. I don't know there's much you can point to right now where they can build around that guy. That's one there. I think they'll be fighting an uphill battle. Offensively, if Olave and Rashid Shaheed stay healthy, I think they can be a good offense. Kellen Moore has had a lot of good offenses that he's worked with. I don't know that he has a quarterback as a starting point, but I do think they have talent on offense. They put 2 first-round picks into tackles, so you should be sound on at least the outside of the offensive line. Their interior, obviously, less invested there, so bigger questions there. But no, I mean, I think that's one of those where what constitutes a win for Kellen Moore in this season, because they're in that weird middle ground where for a franchise, you almost don't want to get to 5 or 6 wins. If they're bad and get the 1 pick, I don't know who that, I think we can stop saying that's Archie Manning or Arch Manning right now, but they're a team that needs a lot. So just them being able to get younger and get newer, whether that's a franchise quarterback or a Nussmeier or whatever that goes there, this is a building year for them. They have to decide, again, there's a world in which they take a big step forward with what they have. It doesn't seem likely. But I think, for them to be a team that, if you think about where Carolina was last year, that's probably about where they are. You don't know what they have at quarterback. They can scrap. If they scrap and go 3-3 in the division and are just, the upset specials and the people that are taking other teams and plucking them away, that's a great year for them. For them to have any relevance, I don't really see a model where they even get to I think they had 5 last year. If they get to 7 wins, you'd say, wow, great first year for Kellen Moore. Because I don't think there's a first-year coach that was handed a more difficult uphill climb than what he has, just in terms of personnel and flexibility. There's not, in terms of offensive personnel, there's not a ton of excitement in that offense. You think about even when they've used higher picks, running back like Kendre Miller didn't really do that much. Receiver, they've added some pieces there. They have Trey Palmer is probably receiver 3.
Could be.
Got cut by the Bucs.
Definitely.
I think Trey Palmer is probably a 30-catch receiver 3 who gets 4 or 5 touchdowns. Might get one against the Bucs. Smart of them to pick him up. He's their kind of guy. He's cheap, and somebody knows the division. But there's just not a lot of young names that, wow, they got to make sure they lock up that guy. That's going to be a special player. And that comes from just not hitting in the draft and putting big investments in young players that didn't work out. Even the guys that they've let move on, the Marcus Davenports and those types that were high cost investments for them haven't really worked out. So draft better. I don't know if that's going to help them this year. If the Kool-Aid McKinstry's and some of the other young guys that they're excited about can step in and can take over they've had so many of the same names at the heart of their defense for at least the post-Breeze era and going back into some of the late Breeze era, that any new faces that come in and establish themselves as dangerous players is what they need. And just somebody that they can have a couple cheap years with and then have the confidence to know that they can keep them when they get to free agency, and they got enough to convince guys to stay around and not go somewhere else, and have hopefully the cap flexibility to make that happen.
Yeah, I'd be floored if they get to 7 wins. Just some tough financial decisions, acting like they're in win now mode, but they weren't. But it'll be the NFL's entertainment. It will be entertaining to watch. Greg, we can't thank you enough for coming on the show today. Again, Greg Auman from Fox Sports. You can follow him at Greg Auman on X and social media. Also, we're going to have a lot of Greg Auman this year on The Insiders with Scott Reynolds and Greg Auman on WDAE. So very much looking forward to that. Greg, thank you for your time. Really appreciate it.
Oh, of course. Thanks, Greg. We'll do it again soon.
Sounds great. Thanks to Greg again. And also a good time to talk about Briar Greaves Insurance and how important they are to PewterReport.com as well. If you are a Pewter Report YouTube channel member or a listener, we'd like you to be a Pewter Report YouTube channel member. You probably remember the late, great Mark Cook talking about Briar Greaves Insurance. Pewter Report's Scott Reynolds has been a Briar Greaves customer for years, and there simply is not a better insurance company in the Tampa Bay area. So visit BriarGreavesInsurance.com to see for yourself. Briar Greaves Insurance is family-owned, and their main goal is helping people. They want to help people find the right insurance policy for you and your family. So whether it's home or auto, boating insurance, or business insurance, turn to Briar Greaves and find out why their personal touch and customer service sets them apart. The days of waiting on hold to speak with an insurance representative that you don't even know are over. With Briar Greaves Insurance, you'll have a relationship with your agent who can answer your questions and advise you on the best policies. As 2 recent hurricanes have shown all of us that live in the Tampa Bay area, there is a cost to living in paradise. Briar Greaves can help make sure you have the right hurricane and flood insurance to make sure you and your home are protected. So visit BriarGreavesInsurance.com today. That's Briar, B-R-I-E-R, Greaves, G-R-I-E-V-E-S. Or call their office today at 813-876-4166. That's 813-876-4166. And tell them that Pewter Report sent you. We appreciate Greg Auman again for coming on the show. He's usually on for an hour, but the Bucs have a special red carpet event tonight for their documentary that will be going on. There's going to be a lot of Bucs representation: Mike Evans, Tom Brady, John Gruden, Doug Williams, Jason Light. So going to be a lot of people there. Pewter Report's Bailey Adams will be representing Pewter Report for that one. So excited to see how that all goes down. Very excited for the documentary. I know Scott Reynolds is in it. I believe Rick Stroud is in it. I'm not sure if Greg is in it, but I guess we'll find out when that gets going. But appreciate everybody that has joined today's show. Let's get to some super chats. Mark Fisher with the $4.99 says, and thank you very much, says, does the absence of Godwin, do you feel we throw more intermediate passes, or does Tez Mike go deep? So I think we're going to see some variance early on from the Bucs. I think there's going to be a ton of running the football early on with Bucky Irving. And why wouldn't you? Bucky Irving's one of the best running backs in the league when he is available. You also have to protect Charlie Heck as well when it comes to this. And you also got to understand that it is a first year of Josh Grizzard running this offense. And yes, he was here last season, was the third down coordinator, passing game coordinator. But it's a different ball game now that he's calling the plays. Makes a big time difference. So important to factor that in. I think early on you'll see some more intermediate and they'll take a couple of shots. But then once Tristan Wirfs is back, I think you'll still go deep. Mike is still going to go deep. Tez Johnson has the speed to go deep. You could try it with Sterling Shepard too, and you could do it with Emeka Egbuka. So even though you don't have McMillan and Chris Godwin Jr., to me, I think it's more important when you have a full offensive line back, you can still definitely go deep. So I see that changing for pretty much the first games that Tristan Wirfs is out. And then when Tristan Wirfs is back, I think it's a completely new ball game in that area of it. But good question, and thank you for the super chat. Let's go to Meets McGee. Thanks for this $5 super chat, who says, I don't see this game being close. I believe talking about Bucs versus Atlanta coming up this Sunday. Players that were taken advantage of by Cousins no longer on the team anymore, along with healthy starters. Yeah, for sure. I mean, you had Josh Hayes in the mix. You had Tyreek Funderburk. There were a ton of injuries to the team this most recent season. Or last season, I should say. So I tend to lean towards the Bucs having all these crazy, chaotic looks on defense that Michael Penix Jr., even though he started 3 games last year, that he has just never seen before because that's what Todd Bowles does as a defensive coordinator. I think it's going to be a big-time struggle for Michael Penix Jr. early in the season, or at least for the first game against Tampa Bay. I don't necessarily know if Penix will continue to struggle throughout the season. That remains to be seen. But for week 1, that's a tough draw against Todd Bowles, who's going to have a healthy defense, plus Hassan Reddick as a new edge rusher with a third-string offensive tackle going against Hassan Reddick and Yaya Diaby. So good question as well. Thank you very much for the super chat. Also, got to remind everyone, we have a lot more shows coming up tomorrow at 4 o'clock. It's the Bucs at Falcons preview. We will look a little more in depth at every single matchup that the Bucs have with the Falcons, where the Bucs have the advantage, where Atlanta might get some work done. We'll see there. And then Thursday, it's can the Bucs dominate in the trenches against Atlanta? We got to look at the Bucs offensive line and the Falcons offensive line as well. Who has the advantage? Where the biggest disadvantage is outside of Caleb McGarry being injured and Hassan Reddick. So, should be interesting seeing that one. Friday, we have our Pewter Insider at 1:30. Bucs special teams has the edge in week 1, ? We'll see. There's a ton of talent now with Tez Johnson, with Cameron Johnson, all of these other players that have this return ability for Tampa Bay. I think that will be very intriguing as well. So that is Friday, but we're not done yet, folks. We have our Pewter pregame show, which will be Sunday at 9 a.m. Myself and Scott Reynolds will have the freshest news for Bucs versus Falcons. We'll let you know who's going to be playing, who isn't playing. We'll look at some specific one-on-one matchups, all of that good stuff. So that is the Pewter pregame show. That is at 9 o'clock. And then finally, our Pewter game day show. That's myself and new to the team at Pewter Report, Daniel Morales. He'll be my co-host for the Pewter game day show. That starts at 1 o'clock. I give my play-by-play, my reactions, analysis, opinions to everything that goes on, while Daniel will be involved too, giving his thoughts and reactions to everything going on. That starts as soon as the game kicks off at 1 o'clock. It goes until the game ends at around 4 o'clock or whenever that is. And then not long after, we have Bucs at Falcons post-game podcast. We'll have a different headline when the game actually finishes and we see what the main storylines are. But we'll have a post-game show as well on Sunday. So a lot of content coming up from pewterreport.com. We'll also have Pewter picks and props. I'll make some picks for win-loss records for the Bucs and other teams. Also, prop bets, season-long accolades for the season. I did my Bucs futures the other day, so you could check out that episode. Also have my college football picks. Then some player props for Cowboys Eagles on Thursday night, and then the Monday night game as well. I'll have separate shows for that. So make sure you check out Pewter Picks and Props, which will be coming out very, very soon as well. You heard me mention the Pewter Insider before. It's probably a good time to give a shout out to our Pewter Platinum members. Thank you all for your support of PewterReport.com. Thanks for being a Pewter Platinum member. Starting with Scott Federico, Rachel Gordon, Noah Parr, Scotty J, Dave Anderson, He's 0813, Ash Fishpool, Joel Elrican, Sam, John Dale Morris, Zach Brannigan, RP89, Connor for Reals, Kevin Thomas, Leighton Carter, The Guy is Gifted, Brandon Riley, Alec Bickler, Nick Dubuque, Zach Jarvis, Mario Thomas, Eric McMillan, Dominic Tarantino, and HK Bucks. Thank you so much for your support of PewterReport.com. We also have some new Pewter Report TV channel members who have either recently joined or rejoined or potentially leveled up as well. So thank you to Cobra HD, Football Fan, and Heart of a Lion Cigar Company. That is awesome to see. I'm a big cigar fan myself, so really enjoy seeing that. And then, of course, we got to give a shout out to our Pewter Premier members, too. A lot of names in there, though, so your name will get to be on the bottom there, but we're not going to read all of them off. But thank you very, very much for all of your support. I'll get to a couple of comments before we end the show, and then I have another big-time announcement that I want all of you to be involved with as well. Curious to see what everyone has as I'm reading some of the comments, what your win-loss record prediction is for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, because we had a PR roundtable that was out today where we gave our record predictions for the Bucs. Let me put that in the chat real quick. So I have the Bucs going 11-6. So does Bailey Adams. So does Scott Reynolds, where Adam and Josh Capo have the Bucs going 12-5. Now, pretty much as Braincase Collective says, I'm thinking 11 or 12 wins. I have the Bucs improving by one more because that's what they've done every single season under the tutelage of Todd Bowles as their head coach. You went 8-9, then 9-8. It was 10-7 last year. So why not improve with one more win this season as well? So I think when you look at the schedule too, there are some rough patches in it. Briefly, I think especially with the receiver injuries early on and a couple of the other matchups they have and Tristan Wirfs being out, to me, I think they're going 2-2 within the first 4 games of the season. I think they'll beat Atlanta and they'll beat the Jets, but I don't know about Houston and I don't know about the Eagles either. I'm also not sold on the Bucs beating San Fran because all they do is struggle against San Fran. But I think Seattle's a win. I think New Orleans is a win. If they can overcome San Fran, then they're in a great spot. Coming out of the bye is a bit tough too, but I don't see them losing any games after LA. I'm higher on the Cardinals than most, but that's a win, especially with it being a home game. They should, in my opinion, they should sweep everyone in the NFC South this year, or maybe go 5-1, but they definitely will sweep the Saints. I think Carolina, they should beat at least one time. They should sweep Atlanta, especially given what happened last year. They'll beat Miami. So I'm just not sold. I think those that have the Bucs going with 12 wins, I think you have them probably beating San Fran. And you also got to think Detroit, Buffalo, LA. You got to at least win one of those 3 games. If they're in that territory, then I think they have a pretty good shot. But curious to see what other people have to say about the overall Bucs record, whether they'll be better, worse, or keep that same record. Let's read a couple of those. Jay says, if Bucs go 9-8, Todd might be done. Kyle Dugan says, a lock to win 10-plus games. I would bet good money on it. I'm with you there. Pager Bro says, division, conference, Lombardi. I love that, too. Awesome confidence with this team. Bat W says, Bucs will go 12-5 at the minimum this year. I respect the confidence. Yeah, so kind of all over the board. We've seen 8 wins, 9 wins, 10. Some people are at 12 as well. So definitely respect the confidence of this team and should make for a great season. I'm so pumped about the first game of the season, Bucs against Atlanta. HK Buck says, we struggle against the Rams, but later in the season, Stafford's back injury may catch up to him. I mean, injuries are always a factor. We saw how that impacted the Lions in the postseason. Yeah, if Stafford isn't healthy, then the Rams are kind of looking at the season they had when Baker Mayfield ended up on the team not too long ago. So certainly something to pay attention to as we look at the Bucs schedule. And if they can get 10 wins, maybe 11 wins. But yeah, those are our predictions for the upcoming season for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Hopefully it's 1,000 yards for Mike Evans and great stats for everyone involved. Speaking of great stats, some stats I'm going to be betting on this year. We have a new sponsor for PewterReport.com. Very excited to talk about Splash Sports. And there's the QR code for Splash Sports that you can sign up with today if you want to help support PewterReport.com. This NFL season, join over 2.5 million people playing on Splash Sports, the home for Survivor, Pick'em, and Quick Picks. Whether you want to create your own contest with friends or take a shot at life-changing prize pools like the 2.5 million Big Splash Survivor, Splash Sports has you covered. And there's the $2.5 million NFL Survivor League that you can get involved in. And for Bucs fans, you can join the official Pewter Report contest on Splash Sports and prove you're the sharpest fan in Bucs Nation. Think you've got what it takes? Download Splash Sports, join the Pewter Report Survivor League, and let's find out who the best Bucs fan really is. That's right, folks. Pewter Report has its own Survivor League on Splash Sports. You can go to Splash Sports, the app, or go online. Use the QR code right there. Or if you go to our social media, you'll see the link to Splash Sports and the link to Pewter Report's Survivor League. If you don't know what Survivor League is, each week you pick one team to win. And you do this with a group of people or a pool in this case. And you keep going until there's only one team remaining. If your team loses, you're out. You're done. But Pewter Report's Splash Sports Survivor League, it's a $15 buy-in. Up to 1,500 people can sign up. But if you want to support Pewter Report and you think you know who's going to win week in and week out, please join our Survivor League, the Pewter Report Survivor League over on Splash Sports. I'm very, very excited about this. Again, use the promo code, the QR code right there for Splash Sports. I'm going to be making some quick picks as well over on Splash Sports. We'll do some pick'em leagues as well later on with the spread. So shout out to Splash Sports. Very excited to partner up with them. You can use it for NFL, college football, Major League Baseball, the PGA Tour, NBA, and WNBA. So plenty of quick picks to be made. I'll be doing that throughout the season for the NFL and college football, which you could see on Pewter Picks and Props. And please join Splash Sports Pewter Report Survivor League today. Would really appreciate that from everybody for your support. If you could join us or do the 2.5 million NFL Survivor League as well. So check out our friends at Splash Sports. You'll hear me talking about them more during Pewter Report podcast and on Pewter Picks and Props as well. That's going to do it for me on today's show. Big thanks to Greg Auman again for joining the Pewter Report podcast. We have the Bucs versus Falcons preview tomorrow at 4 o'clock. We will hear from Bucs players, Bucs coaches, see who's practicing, who's not practicing as we are back at the facility tomorrow. And if you're not already doing so, in the meantime, please make sure you're following us on all of our social media on X, Facebook, and Instagram. We are at Pewter Report. And our YouTube channel is Pewter Report TV. Please like and subscribe. Leave a comment as well on our YouTube channel. Help us get closer to 21,000 subscribers on Pewter Report TV. All right. For Greg Auman, I'm Matt Matera saying thanks, everyone, for watching. And we'll see you tomorrow for another edition of the Pewter Report podcast. Out.